everyone has a story, and I feel like every story will help and every story will heal.
I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed by this time. The dogs have been out and fed, and I got the garbage up, and
Yeah.
I got my wife all organized for breakfast. And I'm thinking, so but it's still, like it's still early.
It's early. I know. My day is crazy today. I have this and then I have to work at 9:30 for a little bit. And then
Right.
she's got some other projects for me that I have to do today.
So
Yeah.
now, okay, so that's good. So you're working and getting paid, I hope.
Yeah, it's freelance. It's like
Right.
pennies I'm getting.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, look, every little bit helps. All right. So now here's the thing. I think we agreed, unless you have another, uh, choice, that we were going to do talk about the book Siddhartha.
Yes.
Okay. Uh, what I like about this book, and what I liked about it teaching students,
Yeah.
it was relatively, as novels go, relatively short.
Hmm.
It was extremely easy to read. In other words, it wasn't the sentence structure wasn't, really complex and too dense and things like that. Same thing with the diction, or what we call it diction, but most people call it vocabulary,
Hmm.
So, it was, but also it has, like you would expect if you're talking about the, the this is really the fictionalized story of the first Buddha. Now, in the book, Siddhartha mentions the first Buddha and meets the first Buddha his name was Gautama, Gotama. Okay. However, Herman Hesse really kind of follow the same uh, progress of Siddhartha's life as Gautama did. Okay. And so the plot basically is Siddhartha, like Gautama, came from a very wealthy family. All
Hmm.
right. And they sheltered him, sheltered them both. But we're going to talk about Siddhartha. So they sheltered Siddhartha. He never saw old people, sick people, ugly people. He didn't know anything about disease. He lived in this beautiful palace with
Oh,
great.
that's like Buddha, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying is, I
Oh.
mean, what I'm saying to you is, it's exactly the same.
Oh, okay.
But in order to make this thing work, because the Siddhartha is this is the progress of a young man into his old age. Okay,
Hmm.
and once again, and this is very true of Hinduism, they'll always say this, that it's not the destination, it's the journey.
Hmm.
Okay. So
Hmm.
this is about his journey from being a very privileged, very coddled boy and young man into what he later became.
Hmm.
Okay. And it's really kind of, in a way, the story of us all, because most of the time when you're younger, if we're lucky, we have parents who care for us and coddle us and trying to keep us unaware of some of the harsher realities of the world.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm a big believer, however, at a certain point, you have to teach your children, hey, it can be ugly out there, and the operative phrase for the smarter, wiser parents and the smarter, wiser teachers is forewarned is forearmed. You need to you need to arm your children with a suitable, appropriate, necessary information so that they know, there are pitfalls out there. There are people who are not nice. There are people who want to hurt you and treat you abysmally. Certainly, when it came to things, let's say sexuality, you know. My mother, who was a devout Catholic, I remember, however, she told us, my sister and me, certainly me, that early on, I must have been we went to parochial school for a couple of years, like third and fourth grade for me. Hey, priests are men first and priests second, and nuns are women first and
Hmm.
nuns second. And therefore, if you feel in some way odd or uncomfortable,
Yeah.
uh, and they're talking to you or dealing with you in a way that you kind of is not what you how you've been treated at home, you better let us know. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so on down the line. Other things. like for example, I learned not to smoke because my mother was a glamour smoker, and by that I
Oh,
mean
okay.
she used to smoke. She's never inhaled, okay, but she was in the business world, okay,
Yeah.
and she would come home, and
Yeah.
then after she ate like a bird, okay. So while my sister and I are having, trying to have dinner,
Yeah.
she had two bites of her food, and then lit up a cigarette, and there's cigarette smoke wafting over the dinner table. And so we're choking, coughing, gasping, you know?
Hmm.
I said, hey,
Hmm.
Ma, what the? And so,
What are
and
you doing?
yeah. So I remember clearly, I'll never forget it. Now we're out I was going to school at Dix Hills and Half Hollow Hills and waiting for the bus. And I guess I guess it was in June. I forget whether I was in sixth grade high school or whether I was already in seventh. I must have been in elementary school. And there was some, kind of rough, what I would call ruffian kids, older, okay, waiting for their bus. And they were smoking, and they said, "Hey, you want to smoke?" I said, "No." Oh, would you? So they're calling me names, in those days they would call you faggot and all these things that
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
don't really say anymore. You puss, you wussy, you sissy,
Yeah. Or the P word.
whatever I'm saying. Yeah, and so I went. No, I was adamant. Okay, so the good news is the bus was coming soon. I think they was coming down the street, and so uh, you know that ended there. But I
Hmm.
was adamant that I wasn't going to smoke, and
Yeah.
I really haven't. Once or twice, had a couple of hits on a marijuana joint, but my friends would always laugh at me because I'd cough, when
Hmm.
I was coughing, I was choking, and I said, "Well, okay, I could get high." In fact, the best high I ever had was a contact high.
Oh,
Okay,
okay.
we were driving. I was working for the surfboard company. Okay,
Yeah.
and we were shipping surfboards up to one of my favorite surf spots, Agunquit Beach, Maine. And people don't
Hmm.
realize, boy, that's a great spot. The waves are pretty continuous and gorgeous and stuff like that. So anyway, but I was with two friends. Okay, so we were in this pickup truck.
Yeah.
So had a bench seat, and I'm driving. Okay, I'm driving back home, and these two guys are having a great time. They're smoking joints. Okay, and it was cold, so the windows are up. You know, so I'm driving. And they're laughing, and all of a sudden, I'm starting to laugh. I'm feeling sillier and sillier and sillier, and I
Yeah. Yeah.
realized by the time we got home,
You're like,
I
uh-oh.
was stoned. I was stoned, and of course, it was great because I didn't have to actually inhale,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
joint,
You
so I
weren't
didn't.
you weren't coughing from inhaling it.
Yeah, I wasn't coughing, I wasn't gasping.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress from Siddhartha. So, but by the way, I think the digressions that we have on these podcasts are always the best part of them, really. I think,
Yeah, I told you, like, I love bloopers. I love candid
yeah,
conversations because
yeah,
those are the most natural,
sure.
elements of us.
And before I forget, this is a different shirt.
Yes,
Just so
I
you know.
do. I see.
See,
Yep.
this is very bright, colorful.
Hmm. Yeah.
All right. And by the way, it's snowing outside right now, so
I know. I
it's
know. I was
crazy.
telling the
Crazy.
kids, I was like, it's sleeting right now as I was
Yeah, I know.
driving.
But anyway, so Siddhartha, what he does is he says, you know what? He goes out one day and he sees old people. He sees sick people, and he asks whomever, his guide or his parents, well, what's that all about? And so he finally learns that yes, people get old and they get sick and they die, and then he realizes that something's not right here, and he meets a group called the Samanas, okay, and they're an ascetic group of people. They walk around and they're into praying all the time and fasting, and in order to get food, they have to beg for their food, and of course, a lot of groups like that all over Asia, even today. Okay, so he finally tells his father, "Hey, look, I'm out of here. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go join the Samanas." So right away, his father, being a Brahmin, because the Brahmin is the highest class in Hinduism, that there was a caste system, and so he was of that high caste, and the father was going, "Not happening. No, I'm not. You're not going. I'm not going to let you go."
Mhm.
So what does Siddhartha do? He stands there. I don't know. I forget, a day, 2 days, whatever. Just stands there, doesn't eat, doesn't drink, whatever. And and finally, the father realizes, okay, this is it. And the line in the book is, the father realizes he's got to let him Siddhartha go do what he wants, and the line is, he realizes, Sid, even though Siddhartha was standing there in front of him, that quote, Siddhartha had already left.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes. And that's
And this is
usually what
something that,
happens with everybody, right? Your
yeah, well, I
mind,
was going to
like
say,
your mind already starts leaving.
yeah, but also it's that when with parents, this goes like our last podcast we talked about letting go, and this is one of the things that parents have to learn. They have to let go, and
Well,
the
parents and also like relationships too. Like with relationships
sure,
not going well, like your mind's already gone. They're already
you got
gone.
to let it go. You got to let
Mhm.
it go,
Mhm.
and there are different ways of letting go. I mean, you can be in a bad relationship and stay hooked up, but things change because of how you're you're perceiving the relationship.
Yeah, yeah. You're not getting
Other time,
supported, emotionally supported.
yeah. Then other times you just have to split and go your separate ways, and
Yep.
that's it. So anyway, so Siddhartha leaves, and he has a friend called Govinda, and Govinda and he are very tight. They don't have a homosexual relationship or anything like that, but they've been childhood friends from childhood, and Govinda follows him, and they become samanas together. Finally, at a certain point in the book, um, they meet. They hear about Gautama, the first Buddha, and everybody's raving about this guy who has attained wisdom and so forth and so on. And they go and they want to meet him and hear what he has to say. And Govinda decides, oh my God, I'm going to follow Gautama and I'm going to join his acolytes and whatever.
Yeah.
And Siddhartha has a long chat with Gautama and says, you know what, you're great, all that stuff, but you know what, I am going to go my own way.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happens is that Siddhartha winds up. Then he meets a businessman, Kamaswamy. Then he meets a woman named Kamala, who, and right now actually we say Kamala because of the vice president. Her name is spelled the same way in the book. And he learns the art of love because she was basically a courtesan or whatever. And then they kind of have a intimate relationship, and then ultimately you find out that the last time he was with her, he got her pregnant. Okay, so then there comes a time later on in the novel where he realizes he has a son who's a bit of a pain in the butt. All right, so now all this happens, okay, and then finally he gets to a point where he meets a ferryman by this one river. Then
Mhm.
later on in his life, much older, he after he left the material world, he was gambling and getting into business. He did all the terrible things that human beings normally do to mess up their lives. Okay.
That they normally do.
Yeah, they. I mean, yeah, because people, they make their lives about making oodles of money, and then they get to pick up bad habits, gambling and fancy women, and too much booze and drugs and things like that. Anyway, he gets away from all that. Okay, and then finally, he hooks up with the ferryman again, and he spends the rest of his life being a ferryman. Just basically doing that job, and Okay, so that's the basic outline of it. He
Mhm.
sees Kamala before she dies, and meets his son, and there's whole that other thing. But the main part, I think, of the book that I really wanted to talk about was a couple of things. Yes, in our lives, our our journey is what counts. Okay, how how where we go and how we go. Okay, how we get from one place in our life to another place. Okay, and what's our destiny? Well, you know what? None of us really know. We're searching for that. And um, so, for example, you know, philosophers, theologians, whatever, they talk about, well, what's man's purpose?
Yeah.
What are we here for?
Mhm.
What am I here for? Okay. And frankly, I'm of the mind that no, we're 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 mammals. We're two-legged mammals. We've been given, for good or for ill, we've been given an intellect and a consciousness that we seem to abuse more often than use properly. Okay, so that's fine. But I remember I guess I said this before. One of the things that I learned in parochial school was they were trying to tell you what our purpose was. Okay, remember it's a Catholic school.
Mhm.
So in the Baltimore Catechism, which is what they used to use in the old days, the very first lines of it, very first chapter was always, what's our purpose? And the answer to that underneath was they had the question, then they had the answer, and the answer was to know, love, and serve God.
Mhm.
God is our purpose. And I'm thinking, really? I remember I'm in the third grade, and I'm thinking, is that what it is? You kidding me?
That's funny. Third grade, you're thinking that already?
Yeah, because this is something which is a quirk of my personality and I think of my progress on my journey going forward. I learned early on I had a really excellent memory,
Mhm.
and I didn't realize I was probably at the time I didn't know whether I was smart or dumb or whatever. I just know that I perceived the world a certain way, and certain things like just didn't that people believed didn't work for me. I didn't really understand them. So like, well, this thing about God. Well, what's that about? Angels. Oh, really? So I was kind of, I guess, a skeptic from the very beginning. You know, and so I said, well, that's certainly not my purpose. I don't get it. I right away just said, I said, well, maybe I should try, but I don't think so. Okay. And of course, when I would go home, uh, my mother and father had other purposes that they thought I should be focused upon. Certainly, to be a purpose was to be a good student and
Yeah.
to be an obedient child.
Yes, listen to your mother.
That's right, absolutely. And I was pretty good for a long time. I was an easy going kid. I was happy. I was cheerful. I was well mannered. I mean,
Yeah,
I
it was
happened.
all fun and games until you found ladies and surfing.
Well, well, you beat me to the punch on that. But yeah, I think that that's when my mother unraveled once she saw that not not only was I starting to take an interest in girls, but more frightening for her was that they were taking an interest in me.
Mhm.
Okay, and she figured, oh, see, so lots of mothers are happy when their sons are, how should I say, less than attractive, and they have a hard time,
Yeah.
connecting with girls. But you know, they were calling the house, when I was in elementary school, and
Mhm.
it was really, in retrospect, it was cute for me, but
But not for her.
no, scary for her, scary
I
for her.
guess she did. Maybe she didn't like losing control and also losing attention from you.
I think when I was younger, that was true. I think once I was at the age where, let's say, a teenager, where I could get someone pregnant, and I was meeting girls who were, as they used to say years ago, nubile, who were of marriageable age and also able to get pregnant. That's when she started to really freak out.
Yeah.
And listen, that's for good reason. I am and what was the other problem? Her biggest purpose in life was to get a college education, which she could not get. She was able to get it, could have gone to Hunter College, whatever, but she had to take care of her
Yeah.
her younger siblings because her mother was dying from a heart disease
Mhm.
early. I think her mother
Yeah,
died.
that was her biggest like
Yeah, so all of a sudden,
obstacle. Yeah.
yeah, so she had a lot of. I've always felt she had a lot of unresolved hostility and
Yeah.
resentment because of the position in which she found herself. Okay, and my mother was an intelligent woman. There's no getting around it. So knew like very good with languages and things like that. So anyway, going back to Siddhartha and how it relates to all of us. Um, One of the things he found, and this is kind of you're going to find, I think, you personally are going to find this interesting vis-a-vis your relationship with me. Okay, and I always felt this way when I was teaching. One of the things Siddhartha learns after he meets up with Gautama Buddha and he's met other people along the way, he
Mhm.
started to realize that teachers, you don't need teachers, okay? You really to access the realities of the world, okay? You need to find wisdom and you need to find your purposes pretty much on your own, okay? Now, I could argue, because I think I've done it, was to be a worthwhile guide. Okay, and certainly uh, you can you can learn from people, even when they don't know they're really teaching you anything. They're
Yeah.
re- by their relationship with you, you learn how they think and how they
Yeah,
work.
like leading by example.
Exactly, exactly. And so that's one thing. It's not. It's much more passive.
Osmosis.
Yeah, it's much more passive. And I
Yes.
think that probably, um, I could say, and I said it to students, I say it to people all the time. Uh, I can give you knowledge as a teacher, and I can give you knowledge not only about literature, because that's what I was supposed to be, and grammar and things like that. That's what I'm supposed to be teaching. But I could give you knowledge about what I was always into: surfing, horses. You
Yep.
know, I know a lot about horses. I'm not a horse whisperer, but I know a lot about horses. Okay,
Mhm.
uh, uh, fishing. You know, teaching, because I taught that for years at the universities. However, I would tell everyone, my future teachers at the university level, even you guys at high school, hey, I can give you knowledge. I can't give you wisdom,
Mhm.
and wisdom is different from knowledge.
Mhm.
And there's another myth that sometimes teachers and parents try to foist on their young people, and that is that if you get wisdom, it'll make you happy. No, if you get really wise, you realize, oh God, the world sucks in a lot of ways. Life sucks. And no, it's going to make me miserable if I dwelt too much on the negative parts of it. So if you get really wise, you say, well, I'm going to dwell. I know it sucks, but I'm going to dwell on the positive stuff.
Well, yeah, then it becomes all your perception of how you're gonna, view life, negative or positive.
That's right. Uh, I again, I used to tell students this. They thought I was crazy. I say, okay, when I wake up in the morning, I make a decision every morning. Do I want to be happy or do I want to be miserable?
Mhm.
Okay. And I always choose I want to be happy.
Mhm.
And people go, well, come on. The kids will say, well, how do you mean you make a choice? I mean, so and so makes you can make you miserable. The principal can bother you. Your parents, your girlfriend, some bully. I said, yeah, but I understand what you're saying. But what you're saying, you're allowing those other people to you know
Affects you.
take up residence in your head, and they're renting that space with
Yeah,
and
that's a good metaphor. Yeah.
yeah, you're letting them do that. And
Mhm.
what you have to do is say, wait a second, okay,
You gotta
and
evict
think
them.
about it and go, is it really me, or is it them? And if it's them, I go, okay, they have a problem. I'm not making their problem my problem. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah,
And
you
I'm
gotta
gonna
evict them from your head.
and once again, it brings me back to the last podcast about letting go. I let go of those feelings. I let go of those people wherever I can. I remember it was very difficult when I was teaching. I had colleagues that I just thought were loathsome people, as people,
Mhm.
and mediocre to terrible teachers. Okay, and I had to work with them every day.
Yeah,
I had to work with them for 32 freaking years.
every
Okay,
day you gotta see them.
yeah, and I had to. And one of the things I learned too, I used to tell this to future teachers. I'd say, hey, look, you cannot tell these people what you really think of them. Okay? Why? You may have to work with them like I did for 32 freaking years, and you have to sometimes be in positions where decisions have to be made, conversations need to be had, compromises need to be agreed upon. They're loathsome. They're terrible with kids, about kids. They're terrible about lots of things. Okay, they're just not your kind of person. Okay, you don't want to have to spend any time with them unless you have no choice because your occupation forces you to do that. Okay, and I was pretty good at navigating that. I thought, you know, I mean, every once in a while you had to confront people. If they confront you, you had to deal with it. But pretty much my thing, because I remember this was I remember in the mornings. Like here we are this morning. So he would say, "Hey, good morning. How are you?" And every time they did that, especially in my English department, I would say
Same thing.
the same thing. And here's what it was, because you've heard me say it. Oh, thanks. I'm my usual magnificent self. Thank you for asking. Why would I change a winning formula?
Mhm.
Now, that there were a couple of former nuns in that department. That would enrage them. Enrage. Just they would go bonkers. Wrong
Really?
attitude, like arrogant. They were everything. They went through all the adjectives.
Hmm.
arrogant, self-absorbed, immodest.
But they would say it to you?
Well, yeah, over a period of time, or they'd let it get around to me. And
Oh.
I used to, of course, and the more I heard that negativity, the more I did it. Because I'm saying, now I was definitely taking up space in their heads. And it
Mm.
bothered them, and especially when a lot of them had decided to not be the kinds of teachers they could have been. And I said, you know what?
Mhm.
Fine. So, so really,
So you stayed on course. You stayed yourself.
yeah, yeah,
And
and I tell you, and I think what happened was, again, talking about teaching by example. You and your classmates and the students over the years saw, oh, look at this teacher. He's cheerful and he's smiling
yeah, you
and
made it fun.
yeah, he's having fun. I used to tell him, I need to have the most fun in this class because I have to do this every day for the next 3 decades. Okay. So if I'm not having fun, you know, I'm going to be really unhappy and I will probably have to make you miserable. Okay.
Yeah, which
So
is
don't make me,
majority of the teachers that we
yeah,
have.
yeah. So don't make me miserable because if you make me miserable, I'm just going to have to play teacher and,
Yeah.
I'll have to, discipline you and
Yeah.
punish you. And
Yeah,
no, no,
it's like
no.
whatever energy you're exuding, we're absorbing it.
Yeah, yeah. Now, talking about teachers, right? Now, when I was training teachers, I used to tell them, here's what you need to do. You need to steal from the best teachers you ever had.
Hmm.
Steal their techniques.
Yeah.
Steal the lesson plans that worked for you. Steal whatever you can do. Take that best stuff and then try to make it your own and put your own little spin on it. Because I'm standing on the shoulders of lots of great uh, role models, and some of them were teachers, some of them were not. My biggest mentor educationally was the school librarian from the time I met her when I was in the seventh grade to the time I graduated college. I mean, I always kept in contact with her. And so I said, so steal from the best. But you know what? You can also steal from the great historical teachers. So, for example, from Socrates, I stole his technique of asking questions. Socrates used to go around asking people questions, and
Yeah.
based upon their answers, he would say, "Well, now what about this? And what about that?" And so, if here's what you told me your truth is, and how do you determine that it's true or not? And he'd go through this whole thing. So he would ask. His technique was asking questions. Okay. Then, of course, I stole from Jesus Christ because what was his technique? He
Hmm.
told stories. The religious types call them parables, but he had these parables that
Hmm.
seemed to have some kind of a point. Okay, and I used to recall, if you recall, my Betty Lou stories were probably
Yes.
the most
Yes.
famous
Exactly.
of my quote parables unquote. They always had a point. Okay, yeah, I was
It was always like a lesson or something.
yeah, I may have been chasing Betty Lou through the woods, half naked, but there was a point. There would be a point about that particular episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
And see, now you're laughing right away. You
Yeah,
soon as you,
because that's not normally something a teacher would ever tell us, less alone like a parent, you know what I mean? Like there's
sure.
always a divide between parents, teachers, and kids. And when you bring us into your world and tell us what's happening with you, you actually make us like lean in and like listen to you. Like, oh, you're telling us a personal story. Like we feel more connected to you when you tell us those personal
And it's
stories.
funny you use the phrase "lean in" because I would actually see it.
Yeah, they're like, oh, you're telling
Yeah.
us
Oh,
gossip.
yeah, okay, he's gonna talk about Betty Lou. So they would
They're
lean
like,
forward.
oh,
Yeah,
what are you telling us?
they
Yeah.
put their pens down and go, oh
Mhm.
yeah, this is gonna be good. Okay,
Yeah, like stories are like essence of us connecting with each other.
for sure. And by
Mhm.
the way, why do you think people read novels? Why do you think they watch movies? Okay, that's the whole deal. That's the whole deal. So okay,
Mhm.
I stole that technique. I also learned from the Chinese poet Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu was one of the um, main people who talked about what they call the Tao. Now, when they talk about the Tao, it sounds like a D, but they spell it Tao. Okay,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
really it was the path that there was in fact a path
Mhm.
that you could follow to attain wisdom and happiness and stuff like that. Okay. Um, I also was trying to teach people that, um, and I'll tell you the other part of it that I really stole, and the most important part that I stole, and this brings us back to Buddha and Siddhartha. I stole Buddha's smile. Okay, goes back to my like with the Betty Lou stories. I had a smile on my face, and that smile denoted with Buddha and with Siddhartha ultimately wisdom, that they had attained a certain level. They could smile because they reached that hot,
Like Nirvana kind
unattainable goal.
of.
Right?
That Nirvana, yeah.
Yeah, so they reached Nirvana,
Mhm.
but Buddha reached it, and then of course Siddhartha. At the end, you see that his friend Govinda realizes that yeah, Siddhartha did in fact reach Nirvana on his own. Okay, so those are simple techniques. You know, you ask kids questions and hear their answers and continue. You tell them stories, parables, whatever, whatever this, and you make sure that you they see your smile and they react to it. They say, well, this person's smiling for a reason. Maybe life doesn't suck as much as I think it is as a teen. I mean, remember, teenagers are just totally upside down, topsy turvy. They're trying to figure out who they are, how they are, what they're going to be, you know, all that stuff. So to see someone who that smile exudes, yes, wisdom, maybe knowledge, also, but more importantly for young people, confidence, confidence. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, even though Siddhartha said, well, you don't need teachers really to get to your destiny, and but yes, he didn't need them, and lots of times I would say the people in my lives who probably again taught me the most and were the most influential in my lives were not technically teachers; they were role models. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like everybody can be some sort of teacher that gives you a lesson, right? Role models and
Yeah, and so I kind of think I had some notes here. Let me just think to it that so I guess really the part of this book that I found really interesting is that he and his friend Govinda, you see the word seeking a lot. They're seeking answers. They're seeking purpose. They're seeking truth. Okay, and I think we all do at some level. And then the problem is when people start to follow the wrong role models, and we see
mhm,
this in our
yeah,
culture.
yeah.
You got people following lying, cheating, thieving, weasel, criminals, sexual predator like Trump. Trump is a total disaster as a human being, a total scumbag. I mean, and yet people go, "Oh, he's great." Oh, yeah. Why? Because he pushes the buttons of their racism, their xenophobia, their greed. I mean, he really is a genius. He's an idiot, but he's a genius at pushing the buttons of people who are so untutored, so unlettered, so uh, uh, just willfully ignorant to absurdly stupid on the one hand, or if they are well educated, they're greedy and power hungry because they figure if we ally ourselves with him and he gets some kind of power himself, we can make money off this idiot and we can also get power off this idiot. Okay. I understand that part of it. I really do. Okay. And when you try to tell people, but he's a charlatan. He's a con man. He's really a joke of it. He's a terrible human being. Okay. And they just go, oh my God, he's like the second coming of Jesus Christ. I'm going, God, how freaking stupid are you?
Uh-oh, we're getting sidetracked.
Oh yeah, but yes, but what I'm saying to you is this is the point about Siddhartha saying you don't need teachers, you don't need to follow people that are whatever. And again, the assumption has been that teachers are going to give you positive, good advice,
Yeah.
but
Not
because
all
they
of
are
them.
role models.
Yeah,
But the
not
other
all
part
of
of this
them.
is no, there are lots of teachers who are scummy. They're no good. They give you wrong advice and they
Yeah.
lead you down the wrong path.
Yeah, I mean, even some teachers are predators, right? They take advantage of kids.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I just think that a book like this leads you to helps you along your way to say, oh, look at how he reached nirvana. Look at how his life,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
what's interesting in the story about how he was in these different subcultures, which I can relate to. In other words, I was in the teaching subculture, the surfing subculture, the horse subculture, the fishing subculture. They have different um, structures, different standards, different perceptions of the world, different philosophies, right?
Mhm.
Different methods. And he did the same. He starts off with this privileged, rich existence. Okay, he was well educated by all the, his Brahmin teachers and stuff. Then he goes off with the ascetics. Then he goes off with this guy Kamaswami and makes money. You
Yeah.
know, that's really good. Then he goes and then he get that money and that level of lush, elegant lifestyle. He meets up with Kamaswami. Okay, I'm not Kamaswami with Kamala, and then of course that brings him into he gets fat, he gets lazy, he gets and so finally he goes, okay, something's wrong here. Okay, he hears an inner voice, and the inner voice says, you need to stop this. You need to change this. You need to go back more toward where you were. Okay,
Mhm.
and that's finally. And by the way, in Hinduism, as I understand it, they have three phases of life. Okay, so the first phase is they're growing up and whatever, and then they're supposed to get educated. Okay, whenever possible, learn stuff. Then the second phase is when they have work, have families, raise children, whatever, try to make a living, whatever. And then when that's done, the third phase is to kind of basically go off by the river, by the Ganges or whatever river, go off and be meditative. Go off to meditate, and they cogitate, and they just kind of say they get more into their spiritual side.
Mhm. Mhm.
See, so in many ways, that's also part of what you see in this novel about Siddhartha, is that he does pretty much exactly that. At the end, he finally ends up hanging out by the river and meditating and reaching Nirvana. How
So
about
I'm
that?
assuming Siddhartha was written after Buddha.
Oh, well, no, no. First of all, let's tell you, I think he wrote this book. This is by Hermann Hesse, Hesse. He wrote this, I believe it was published, I'm going to say early 1900s. I think it was like 1918. I don't know,
Uh-huh.
someplace around there. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I have to check. Because, see, that's another thing when I taught students. I never worried about too much about specific dates.
Yeah.
I talked about genres, types of literature. I talked about centuries. So, for example, the 18th century, the 18th century, the kind of toward the beginning was very rational, very logical.
Yeah. So
Uh,
was Buddha written afterwards?
no, no, no. Buddha predated Jesus Christ by 500 years. That's another thing.
Oh, okay.
So Buddha existed. Buddhism, as I recall it, it started in India. Okay, yeah, and then it got transmitted to the Asian country, the other Asian countries,
Hmm.
China, Japan, whatever.
Hmm.
So Buddha existed a good solid 500 years before
Okay.
Christ. Okay, and then Christ came along,
Hmm.
and you know how I feel about Christianity,
Yes.
Catholicism. It's the most successful. It's
we,
probably one of the
we
most.
we know how you feel about that, and
Hey, look, it's one of the most successful cult religions ever on the planet. It's a cult
Mhm.
religion, okay? And this is the other thing too. I mean, I guess you could call like in Siddhartha, like the Samanas, were like based probably like it would be a cult. They believe all kinds of wacky stuff, and they live their lives by those wacky theories. I mean, I don't know that we want to live our lives starving and begging and things like that. However, I also will say to you that they are correct and Buddhism is correct, saying, you know what? This is the tenets of Buddhism. The main tenet is uh, suffering exists. That's why I said to you before, the world sucks. People say suffering exists.
Mhm.
Then it says, well, and your suffering is really caused by desire for stuff,
Yeah.
other people, whatever. So what does that mean? You have to control, quell your desire.
Yeah.
And that means even love. Okay?
Yeah.
So for example, what's the one thing you don't want to do if you want to not suffer? Okay? A, you don't want to have children. Forget that. Now you have two kids. You're going to suffer whether you like it or not. Just get over it, honey. Get over it. Okay?
Hmm.
I love you, but you're going to suffer. Just, cry your tears. I'll send you boxes of Kleenex, whatever. It's fine. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and
Now,
cases of wine.
yeah, right, right. The other part of it is you probably shouldn't even get you shouldn't get married. You should pretty much live your own life. And now that's saying that's again, and in book to Siddhartha, he has sex with I always called her Kamala, but it's probably but only he has sex and but he doesn't. You find out he doesn't really love her.
Mm,
Okay,
mhm,
he's intimate with her.
mhm.
That's different.
Yeah.
See? That's different.
Yeah.
And then of course stuff. Now I'm well aware of. I have so much stuff. You've been to the house. I've got stuff. I've always had stuff. And my stuff, it means yes, cars, nice cars, horses, boats, fishing gear, all my books, clothing. I've got 169 of these Aloha shirts. I mean, who has? I mean, really, what is
Yeah.
that about?
Yeah.
Okay, now but here's the difference. If I lost everything tomorrow, okay, I would maybe cry one big tear and move on because who I am, what I am, isn't about my stuff.
Mhm.
Isn't about my things. Isn't about my hand tail. Let's
As long
see.
as you have you.
Well, this is it. It's about saying, here's who I am.
Mhm.
Here's who I've been, good and bad, because I've not been a perfect human being.
Yeah. Nobody's
Right?
perfect.
That's right. And okay, and then who am I going to be now that I have nothing concrete, just me?
Yep.
It means that I'm forced to be more spiritual than I ever had planned to be.
Mhm.
How's that?
Yeah. As long as you have your mind and your health, I mean, that's the most important thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I kind of think that,
But then again, you also need like food and shelter, the basic needs.
well, yeah, but see, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. That's why the Samanas were so interesting. Their basic needs, they walked around basically in loincloths, okay,
Hmm. Hmm.
begged for their food, and they spent
Yeah.
most of their time, when they weren't doing that, they were praying,
Yeah.
okay? And so, uh, I don't know that it made them happy, but the point is that they're saying, you know what? Uh, as I've heard from many different people in my life, we come into this world upside down and naked, and we
Hmm.
go out the same way, upside down and naked. Okay?
Hmm.
So, and in between, we try to make believe that our lives have some kind of purpose, some kind of value.
Yeah.
And this is where, of course, I had to become, if I were to be religious, I would be a, a Buddhist Taoist existentialist. Okay? Because um, none of them preach a supreme being.
Hmm.
Whereas they don't have any. Buddha was not a god. In fact, the people who made him into a divinity, he'd be very upset because
Hmm.
that's not what he was driving for.
Yeah.
And of course, Taoism talks about a pathway through life, and existentialism says, as I've said to you in podcasts before, the existentialist has to say, "Hey, I have to decide what my purpose is going to be, and then once I make that decision, then I've got to be true to the that purpose, getting to that purpose, developing that purpose. And if I don't do that, then I'm inauthentic. To be an authentic human being, I've got to be true to my purpose, which leads me to one of my favorite philosophical thoughts, Aristotle. Okay,
Hmm.
here's Aristotle. Aristotle was the one, I'm pretty sure, but I think Plato said it too. But Aristotle said, for us human beings to be happy, we have to be true to our purpose. Okay, and what he would say theoretically is, for example, let me get a pen here. Here's a pen. Okay,
Hmm.
pen, good. And he would say that a pen, its purpose is to write with, it's to
Yes.
write stuff.
Yes.
Okay, that's this purpose. We made pens so we could write stuff. Now, if I
That's a good.
decide,
That's a good pen too.
yeah, it is. Uh, I sign all my checks with these.
Yeah, I
So
could tell. I know that pen. That writes really well.
yeah, it does. So see, I say you're learning. Anyway, but now if I decide around late in the afternoon when it's my cocktail hour, and I decide to use this pen as a swizzle stick to mix my cocktail and mix my
Hmm.
drink,
Hmm.
he would argue, well, now you have an unhappy pen because it's not being used for its purpose. It's
Mm-hmm.
being used for a totally different purpose than it was designed
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
And so his notion was for human beings, because we have intellect, we need to use our intellect and we need to um, kind of define what our purpose is going to be with
Yeah,
using
and
it.
that's everyone's struggle to figure out what their purpose is. And most people don't know what their purpose is.
That's exactly right.
And
They
then they're
all,
unhappy and making everybody else unhappy.
absolutely. And then, but here's the part. I think the issue is if they start believing in certain kinds of theologies and philosophies, okay, that are telling them what their purpose is,
Mhm.
that's part of the problem. And
Yeah, because you're not being you, you're not being authentic.
yeah, and this is
You're
where we're going
following
to end this.
someone else's.
Yeah, and this is where we're going to end this conversation, and that is that what this book tells us, what we already should have learned on our own, is that we must again uh, des- des- decide what our own purpose is going to be, live by that decision, which is again kind of existentialist, and then we have the chance, not the definite probability, but we have the chance to be happy. We have the chance to say we've lived a life of value, live a life of, uh, you know, grace and importance to us. How about that?
Yeah, totally. I love it.
See, and
Hmm.
so I think that I'm gonna. And by the way, I'm gonna do what I always used to do. I'm gonna end my class with a big smile. Big big Buddhistic smile. And go,
Hmm.
have a good day, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, I love
That's
it.
my way.
Thank you so much. I'll see you next time with shirt number. Well, we finished our 27th, right,
Right.
podcast. So this is 28 shirt, and we'll see you on the 29th.
So now here's what you do is you subtract 28 from 169, and we got a long way to go. So these podcasts, you have to keep having them with me because you're keeping me alive. See, this is talk
I
about
know.
purpose. This gives me a purpose now to do a podcast like at least once a week, and
Hmm.
it's keeping me going, sweetie. How
I
about
know.
that?
Maybe we need to do two so we can get through these shirts,
That's
right?
yeah.
We might
Because
have
you
to
have to
do.
figure that would be 169. Do that. You could do the say eight. That's one. Two. That would be so that's what 140. Uh, what did I say? Yeah. For 141 days, I have 141 more podcasts to do. How's that?
I know. I'm keeping you alive.
That's right. We'll set that as a goal. Okay, babe.
Okay, I'll see you next time. Bye.
Take care. Bye now.
Bye. Like finally getting back to me, my art. All I want to do is art. And the other thing is that I love stories. So like to me, art is in everything. Your art is your voice, your speaking, your connection, you can feel everyone's energy. That's your art. It's the art of living to me. So art and hustle to me is the art of living and art of it and everything.
I hope that you've cut that piece right there and making